Hello guys, it's Shane Davis talking and drawing. I'm here with none other than my beautiful, lovely, sometimes will make me a sandwich wife of mine, and today we're going to talk about DC and Marvel Comics sometimes paying shut up money to comic creators when they use their creations in film. So here we go. So we've skimmed through this article quite a bit, but obviously I already know most of this because I'm a victim of it. But we're going to talk a little bit about Marvel and DC Comics shut up money to comic creators just because of pay, just because of, they pay. What you have to understand, guys, if you're new to this channel, we talk about it time and time again. But, comic companies pay comic money to make comics, but then they already have your ideas, and those ideas then can be movie roles, and then that's movie money, and you get nothing. You see?
Well, the most recent brouhaha started when Falcon and Winter Soldier came on air on Disney Plus. Ed Brubaker came out and said this: "I made more on Screen Actors Guild residuals than I ever made on creating the character." So, yikes. Yeah, he did appear in one of the Marvel movies, right?
Right. It was the Winter Soldier movie. He was in the background of the lab when they were trying to wipe Winter Soldier's brain or something like that. He's one of the scientists. So.
All right. So he gets more money for some background character appearing, a couple of seconds on big screen than he ever did for helping make this character Winter Soldier.
Right.
Okay, that sounds like very fair compensation. But we know that there's a history of this happening in the industry. For example, back in 1938, Superman creators Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, they signed away their character for $130. Now, that was a lot of money back then, but if you consider the billions of dollars that Superman has made over all the time since, it's like, what? That's not very fair compensation, is it?
And a little sad factoid there, it was the Heritage auction. They actually sold the check that these guys signed for $130, and it went for thousands.
Wait, so they never cashed it?
Check. Yeah, no, it was cashed. It's just, well, you have to understand what happened with the comic book companies is they were kind of stamped and returned to who wrote the check. So a check is kind of like a contract in a weird way. If you take money for something, then they kind of want to leverage that check as a point of legal reference. So whoever it was at DC Comics found it very important to keep this check on file because they knew they were kind of robbing the bank.
We bought Superman for $130.
Right.
Sounds a bit like something that happened to Manhattan, centuries ago, but whatever. Okay, so I guess it is based on work for hire. It's pretty easy to see. Okay, so these people created this character, so they are all some kind of compensation when the character appears on screen. But what happens though when you adapt storylines to films?
Yeah, and again, this is really the crux of the problem is when film companies bought these comic companies like Warner Brothers and Disney and, now AT&T and then Discovery, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But when movie studios own these comic book companies, obviously it's not arguable. It's very obvious that basically comics are research and development. Last 4 or 5 years, basically you would hear editors talk about R&D more and more when they were developing something. You'd be like, why are these characters being pushed in? Why do I have to make 6 new characters for you for one comic that you're going to kill? And they're like, we'll pay you something in research and development. Just please give us 6 new characters. And I have this in email, like I could prove this. And a lot of editors quickly saying you'll get compensated. And this is what they tell creators when you don't want to give corporations new ideas, new designs. And you go, but Shane, a new idea for a character, your idea for the character isn't really going to go too far unless it's got legs on it as like a cool design, a cool costume, some cool weapons, whatever. These are the things that kind of get put wheels on the wagon, so to speak. So a lot of this, and maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a cartoonist, is a lot of it's on the design end. And I've even had people say redesign, like say Batman Beyond Robin, and then they'll want 3 designs. And I'm not getting paid anything for it. I just have the promise of work. So then I do it. And they're like, now mix this head on that one, and bam. And why that happens from the editor is, and they kind of shuffle the design around, isn't because they oftentimes don't have an art degree or anything. The reason they're doing that is an editor for a company actually stands as a representative of the company, and it actually points out they have a stake in the development of the character. Without a Marvel or DC Comics editor, technically two creators could lawyer up and pull their creation back from the company. It's actually the addition of an editor involved in one email or something that's a representative of the company that pollutes everything as far as creator rights if it ever went to court.
There are also cases, though, in recent years, especially you hear that pretty much every Marvel movie walks away with $1 billion at the box office.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim Starlin is probably the one that turned a lot of hits. He publicly said that Warner Brothers paid him more for a minor character that appeared in the Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, than he ever did for characters, in total, in sum total, for Marvel characters like Thanos, Gamora, and Drax. Now, this character is, I don't know if you guys heard of him, KGB's like KG who? And it's like, wait, that character somehow becomes, it gives Jim basically more compensation than he ever did for Thanos. Like, how does that even work?
And don't feel bad if you don't remember seeing KG Beast, this random character in Superman, Batman, Dawn of Justice, because he was just a red-haired Russian hitman in the background. That was it. He was not a toy. He was not anything. That's basically it. He was just a Russian hitman. And this is a sad state of affairs. Obviously, Marvel Comics has a history going back to Jack Kirby, holding back originals and so on, and the Kirby estate trying to sue. So a lot of bad history there with Marvel Comics and how the way they treat creators.
Well, Jim Starlin is saying that apparently it is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The way these agreements are written up, Disney can be more generous if they want. It is written right there that they can change the terms to make it better. But see, why would corporates want to give a creator more money if they can get away with giving them less money? Well, maybe if it looks bad to the public, then they'll be like, okay, fine. As they call it, it's shut up money.
And not just shut up money. Jim had a speaking role in the last Avengers movie, Endgame. So I mean, look, obviously they were finding any which way. He had a cameo, speaking role, everything. And they finally ponied up and gave him the money he deserved with Thanos.
So for years, though, the job of determining payment for DC at least was Paul Levitz, right? So what did Paul Levitz do exactly?
Well, Paul Levitz had this, he had this title. It was called like Legacy Creators or something like that. And his job was to try to reach out to the estates and basically try to keep them kind of on the happier side. So he was dealing with the Siegel and Schuster estate a lot while that case was still going on. And that was a very important case because if it had ruled in the Siegel and Schuster's favor, basically every corporate comic book character would have been a legal point for any creator to pull back their creations from these companies.
Well, is there anyone like that, like Paul Levitz, anymore in DC?
Maybe Jim Lee. I don't think that position really exists anymore, to be honest. Maybe it was Dan Didio, and then now Jim Lee. I don't think that position exists anymore.
Well, that'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, especially when there are more and more DC adaptations coming out. There are people talking about how, because this is what happens when you do work for hire. So you have people like Todd McFarlane who decides, you know what, after you get your name through working with these big companies, you go on and you create your own IPs because you have to try and make some real money instead of being paid, hey, here's $1,000 check, thanks for making us Venom, bye.
Right. And people maybe turn their nose up at Todd for years for not ever coming back to touch Spider-Man one more time or something like that. But you have to understand, the way Todd looked at it is a little bit of a symbiotic relationship. He used the companies to build a name, and then from there, he didn't let them use them anymore. And, he built a Spawn empire, Image Comics. A lot of these creators got balls on them and went out and made their own comic book companies and their own comic book characters. And even if they sold less, they still end up prospering more than if they were doing work for hire work at Marvel and DC Comics.
So there is definitely one issue, though. For example, when a creator creates dozens of characters, it can be a full-time job trying to make sure credit is given when it's due. For example, former Marvel editor-in-chief Roy Thomas, he has to take them up with Marvel employees who act as in-between to the Disney side. So it's like, you believe it or not, the creators don't automatically get a check when their creations are used. They actually have to chase on the corporates like this. Like, for example, Thomas had to flag Disney and tell them, hey, I wasn't credited for Loki for creating the Timekeepers. And It's like, oh, wow, okay, Oh dear. And then Disney, by the way, they never did give him credit for that.
This happens with us every year with the Red Lanterns I created at DC Comics. If I actually have to do Google searches or buy Lego movies and take screenshots, and as embarrassing as this is, send them to DC Comics. So, and then beg for money. And as of now, like there's a video game since 2010, DCEU Online. Bleeze was a DLC character, a boss in that game. I've never been paid $1. And I'm having to go through records with DC Comics trying to figure out why I've never been paid for this video game where other creators or the characters have been paid upwards 6 figures. So this is an issue where creators, even the paperwork that the companies draft, they don't really respect their own contracts. They don't respect their own agreements with creators. They don't respect creators in general. And that leaves you in this bad position where, you know, you're a creator, you took a blank piece of paper, you made something for them. They said, sign this and we'll compensate you for products and stuff. But then you're left knocking at the door with their paperwork that's signed in your hand. And that puts a creator in a bad position. Well, do you go get legal representation? And then with that, you're never going to work in the comic book industry again.
Well, that's interesting to note, though, that this is not something that just happens to maybe 1 or 2 creators. We have heard creators like even Jimmy Palmiotti speaking publicly about how they've chased down DC for paychecks and stuff. So, yeah, just because you get credited as a co-creator doesn't mean you get paid automatically. This is a very big mess right now in the comic industry, which they are not resolving, by the way, which is becoming a bigger and bigger issue as they use more and more of these properties, especially with the Warner Brothers and Discovery merger happening.
And kind of the thing that's happening is, you have to wonder, are they hoping that some of these creators kick the bucket and then they don't have to pay them? And that's how you end up with the estates, like the Siegel estate or the Kirby estate, chasing after these companies. And then when they get in court, you're like, look, that's not even him. That's just their grandkids. That's whoever. That's not like, that's a bad, like, that's an example of how you never paid them to begin with, that their own children or grandchildren are in court with you trying to get money that you agreed that you would either pay them or whatever. So, and I hate to bring age up in some of these creators that we're naming in this list, but if you'll notice, some of these guys are really on the older side, and you have to wonder if they're just hoping that maybe 1 year they just won't be there and they'll get to keep the money for themselves.
Ooh, Starlight is kind of old, isn't he? Maybe they're hoping that something
Really
unfortunate happened to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, yikes. Well, just so you know, though, sometimes, maybe it is really a case of the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
On that note, guys, if you will, please go sign up for Inglorious Rex. The link is down below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we will keep you up to date on the falling comic book industry. And I'm going to leave you guys with the trailer for Inglorious Rex. Support creators and creator-owned books. Really, let's fix this broken system. So go sign up for it today, and this should be launching, I think, in like a month. So here we go. Pardon me and my tone. You can't step to my throne. They ain't working like me. I did this on my own. You asking where we been, huh? I don't know where to begin, huh? All this dirt on my skin, I just came here to win. I'm more than a man, I'm a monster. Somebody call a pastor, doctor. I got a 6 cents for a pasta, so now I'm coming for the whole roster. It's not a game, why you playing with me? You could double back, lose track, try and hang with me. It must be in my veins, something you can't tame, cause I break the chains. Can't control me.